Okay, XTR. Hello, everyone. As we head toward the weekly close in the markets, we once again have some important data to talk about. There's the inflation data coming from the US. Similarly, there's inflation data on the Turkish side. And as you all know, there are ongoing geopolitical risks in the Middle East and concerns about energy supply. Because of these concerns, especially with the security risks around the Strait of Hormuz, the possibility of a disruption in energy supply has come back onto the agenda for the markets. As a result, we can say that expectations for a rise in energy prices and also for an increase in inflation have started to grow. Of course, during this period, industrial stocks and aviation stocks have also been under pressure. On the other hand, when we look at the stock market, energy stocks have moved in the opposite direction and started to gain positive momentum. We'll talk about the stock market in a moment, but before we get to that, it's worth noting that this increased risk environment in the markets has caused a lot of confusion globally. There is a statement from officials at the European Central Bank. There is also a statement from the governor of the Bank of Slovenia. Their shared perspective is actually very clear. In other words, they say that they were planning to discuss interest rate cuts in the upcoming period. But due to recent events, especially the rising tensions in the Middle East, those rate cuts have been shelved. In fact, they say we might even see discussions about rate hikes in the next few months. They mentioned that they might even bring up the possibility of further rate hikes. First, let me talk about the U.S. inflation data. U.S. inflation was announced at 2.4%, and the annual rate is also 2.4%. Expectations were also for 2.4%. So for now, we can say there isn't a significant problem with inflation in the US. In a bit, we'll also talk about the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey's interest rate decision for our domestic market. Let's consider this when we talk about the stock market. But first, we can say that the fact that the inflation data from the US came in as expected has somewhat reassured investors. However, we can also say that both investors and institutions are very confused about what Trump might do. In Trump's latest statements, he said that the attacks against Iran are going very successfully. From the American perspective, we're very successful, and this operation isn't over yet. He said that even though they've largely neutralized the threat, the operation's still ongoing. Trump might even bring up a new operation by the end of this week. He hasn't clearly gotten what he wants from Iran yet. In fact, he hasn't gotten anything so far. So if Trump makes a statement like we're pulling out at this point, it would be an extremely unsuccessful attempt for him, and he is definitely aware of that. That's why he'll want to make new moves in Iran. This is actually something investors should pay attention to in terms of risk perception in the markets. And I think that during this period, it's more meaningful to reduce risks rather than increase them. As I took these steps, the first actions I took were on the American stock market side, personally. I mentioned that I sold all of my stock holdings in the market. I mentioned that I exited the American stock market in stocks and also pointed out that the strong trend structure in gold hasn't been broken. We'll also start evaluating Borsa Istanbul once we move on to the charts in a bit. Let's see how the markets are looking as we head toward the weekly close. Which products am I holding on to and which ones am I selling? Let's talk about all of these separately, friends. First, I want to start with gold. When we look at spot gold, we see that today it's been moving around the $5,200 level. And what stands out to me on the 4-hour chart is that it's been in a significant accumulation zone for about 2 weeks. And this week, it's continued to maintain its strong trend structure. These are important points for me. With tomorrow's weekly closings, I expect that spot gold will now hold above the $5,200 level and start making new moves upward. So I think the new upward wave in gold could start to show itself next week. Similarly, I believe silver prices will follow gold. In the last 3 days, we can see that silver has held the $83 level well. Previously, $79 was the critical threshold, and before that, the $70 to $73 range was also a critical threshold. After testing these levels, silver has managed to hold them each time, and in a scenario where gold is rising, I definitely think we need to have the same perspective for silver as well. But lately, what I keep saying is this: I trust gold much more than silver, since the trend hasn't changed at all, since gold is seen as the safest haven in the world, and because I believe that, unfortunately, the crises in the Middle East will continue rather than end. And of course, since there's someone as unpredictable as Trump leading America, I think it makes sense to keep holding on to gold and even to buy more gold. And these are the best steps to take before these increases have even shown themselves, before we've seen even more. I can't say that I'm very hesitant about making new gold purchases. Look, not too long ago, I mentioned that you could buy a gram of gold at 6,300 TL, 6,400 TL levels. In roughly a month, the price of a gram of gold has reached 7,300, and I can still say the same thing. You can still buy a gram of gold at this level. You just need to make your move, accepting that the risk is a bit higher now compared to yesterday or a month ago. What do I mean by risk? The markets don't have to move the way I want them to. We're currently attempting to determine exactly which direction the markets will fluctuate and trend and strategically prepare ourselves for the future accordingly. In my opinion, gold will continue its upward trend. I also think that the accumulation phase we've seen recently is now complete. Looking ahead to next week, it could be a week where we see even more significant gains for gold. At least, that is my personal view on gram gold. Speaking of gram gold, let me also mention Tether Gold. This is a product I've talked about a lot recently. You can trade it on OKX TR in a way that's directly equivalent to gold. I'm leaving the OKX link below the video. When you register with that link and trade Tether Gold on OKXTR, your potential profits will increase, just as if you were buying gram gold or ounce gold. There's absolutely no difference at all. There's a very small price difference, but it's not a significant amount, and I still think it's still a relatively cheap option under today's conditions. Look, I don't hold the same views for mint gold. In the trend I've been following for mint gold, I said there's a serious anomaly. It's moved significantly away from the cloud region, and now mint gold is at a level that's very far from physical gold or ounce gold. At this point, I don't think it's suitable to make new purchases. In my opinion, mint gold is not a logical product, and during this period, mint gold hasn't made any profit for investors in the last 3 months. On the contrary, everyone who made new purchases ended up losing money, even though gold itself continued to rise during this period. And in the coming period, for me to reconsider mint gold, if by any chance mint gold drops to around 73 lira within the next week or 10 days, then we could say that choosing mint gold over Tether Gold would make sense. But even in this scenario, I still don't think this product makes sense, and I wouldn't choose to make a new investment here. Either I buy physical gold, or I buy Tether Gold, or I take a position in ounce gold, or I trade in leveraged gold funds like UGL. We actually get to discuss these details and nuances with followers in extra live sessions on YouTube memberships. Anyone who wants can also join us in these discussions. Now, let me also show you the oil chart. We've been following this oil chart for a very long time. As I just mentioned, we especially discussed it on YouTube memberships. For the past few months, we've been talking about how a bullish trend would start around the $55 levels, and I specifically mentioned that once it broke $67, oil would enter a serious upward zone. Oil has shown this upward movement, and I still think it has room to rise. It continues to maintain its potential uptrend both on the daily and 4-hour charts. Right now, the $95 level is acting as resistance, while the $80 level is serving as support. I recommend keeping an eye on these levels. If it stays above this resistance level, the next resistance for oil will be at $115. This extra rise in oil has also led to additional gains in energy stocks. For example, stocks like Energisa and Tupras have seen extra profits. And Energisa stock has been at the very top of the list of stocks I've talked about as number 1 on Borsa Istanbul in recent months, the one I've shown the most interest in. Energisa has especially been one of the stocks I've talked about the most and one of the top performers. When we look at the charts today, the situation is still the same, because energy costs are rising. The problems in the Strait of Hormuz are also having an impact, especially in the pricing over the past month. This is also true for Tupras, but overall, energy stocks with strong backing, good balance sheets, and solid technicals continue to hold their ground. But if you ask what my thoughts are on stocks on Borsa Istanbul, let's talk about the Borsa Istanbul index now. By the way, the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey kept the interest rate unchanged. Let me add that here as a note as well. Both in Turkey, the US, and Europe, further interest rate cuts don't seem very likely during this period. Now, when we look at the current outlook of Borsa Istanbul, within the trend I've been following, it has shown a nice rise over the past 3 months. As you know, back in December, I mentioned that with Borsa Istanbul at the 10,800 level, there could be a strong upward trend and that I took positions accordingly and so on. At the point we've reached today, after the recent rise, it came up to this area and then dropped down from there. After falling below the cloud region, we started to see signs of weakness in the trend. I was expecting a rebound here. That rebound happened, and at this point, Borsa Istanbul has reached the 13,300 level. And at this level, I started taking profits and reducing my risks. I decreased my positions in Borsa Istanbul and significantly increased my cash holdings here. And I can say that this trend has been a profitable one for me. Even though there were some partial losses during the drop last Wednesday, overall it was a good and profitable trend for me. Of course, if you ask why I'm reducing my positions here, I can say that the ongoing tensions in the Middle East, Trump not having gotten what he wants yet, and, in my opinion, the high likelihood of him launching a new operation, as well as the technical signs of weakness starting to show, have all been factors for me. If we see a potentially rising Borsa Istanbul in the upcoming period, I will choose to fully liquidate my assets. My indicator has also reached the cloud region, both on the 4-hour and daily charts. And at this point, I decided it was appropriate to take profits. Like I said, selling during a rebound rather than panicking when the price drops was the most logical option for me. And I chose this option for myself. I had already sold off most of my positions in the US stock market, as we've discussed many times. I haven't kept any assets at all on the US stock side. I increased my cash position by selling these products. Now, thanks to this, I have cash on the side to consider new purchases in the upcoming period. I think we'll also have the chance to discuss these early on in the YouTube members chat. Other than that, if we look at the US stock indices, nothing has changed yet in the NASDAQ 100. Look, since October to November, the US stock market hasn't made investors any money. In fact, it's caused losses. The trends have weakened and it's been a serious waste of time. Even if the stock market just stays flat or moves only 1 or 2%, that's still a loss for me. We can say the same thing about Borsa Istanbul, because if I can't make more than 3 or 4%, something even a time deposit can earn in this environment, or if I can't see more aggressive gains, or if the risks are too high, I think it's best to adjust my strategy accordingly. Look, on the NASDAQ too, after falling below the cloud region, it just hasn't been able to break above it. So there's no positive development in the American stock market index, and we've seen this movement throughout February. So for about 45 days, the NASDAQ 100 hasn't shown any upward movement. It's been 45 days since it dropped below the red cloud, and investors are still waiting. If there's more easing and I see that the risk has softened a bit more, I think we can talk about taking new positions here as well. If we talk about Bitcoin, we might see a slightly milder scenario for Bitcoin, because compared to other scales, we haven't seen Bitcoin, the major altcoins, or the entire crypto market enter a profitable environment. They've lost more value instead. Since October to November, it has experienced an additional period of losing value, but within this region, it's also getting closer to an area where it could bring about a bit more positivity. So if Bitcoin manages to reach the $73,200 level in the next few days, we'll be talking about an increase in its positive momentum. And for Bitcoin, which has lost so much value and, according to indicators, has entered oversold territory, we would expect positivity to increase a bit more. But if you ask whether anything has changed, the answer is no. It has drawn a trend where it has been constantly accumulating around the $61,000 to $70,000 range. I know that investors are feeling very tired and fed up. I share the same views as those investors. We can say that in the next few days, Bitcoin's trend will become even clearer here. Now, either these trend breaks will happen, or we'll see prices drop a bit further. For that, we're going to need at least a few more days. I'm fairly certain that we'll probably be discussing all of this in more detail in the next video. Look, Ethereum is also in a zone very close to the $2,129 resistance level. XRP is a bit further away from the cloud region. For now, $1.43 is its resistance level, and for Solana, the $91 level is the resistance. Overall, not much has changed with altcoins. Not much has changed in the cryptocurrency market either. But for the past few weeks, it hasn't been able to break out of a region where it's been forming a solid base. This gives us the impression that instead of the trend weakening, it's actually forming a strong base. Because in the area it's formed, according to my indicators, all it needs for a potential upward move is just a small breakout. Once Bitcoin moves above the trend level, we'll be able to say it's entered a positive zone. Hopefully, within a few days, in other words, by the next video, we'll be able to talk about this. Otherwise, just like in other markets, negative pricing will continue. There's nothing to do in the medium to long term. The most reasonable thing investors can do is to build a good portfolio and manage their risks proportionally. After that, just sit back and watch how the prices play out. Other than that, for now, there's nothing else I can add. No matter what happens with the prices, I hope you're always in good spirits. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications is an investment tip for yourself. With the intention of bringing you updates before they even happen, see you again soon.